All right, hello everyone. My name is Kevin. I'm here with Barbara. Together, we both like to welcome you all to our latest Novedge Webinar Series episode. For this week's webinar, we're teaming with Canadian distributor Resolve Software Solutions to cover the steps for creating a 3D site model from a surveyor's file, including a geo-referenced data, alignment with air photos and DWG info, as well as cleaning up edges and problem data points after creation. After the existing site model is created, Geoff from Resolve will look at site analysis and the use of modifiers to create the proposed site. For those of you who don't know, Geoff McBeath is President of Resolve Software Solutions Incorporated of Vancouver, Canada. Geoff is a longtime user and trainer of Vectorworks, first using the software while working in architectural firms, and then later making that knowledge the core of his business. Geoff also developed and delivered the first seminar series and training CDs that Nemetschek Vectorworks offered across the United States and in Canada. Today's presentation is about 40 minutes long, and afterwards we'll have a brief Q&A where Geoff will answer your questions live. So submit yours to us at any time into the chat window below. But before we get going with today's presentation, here's an overview of what we do at Novedge. Novedge Webinar Series is brought to you by Novedge.com. As one of the largest online design software stores, we offer a huge assortment of software solutions that cater to virtually every designer's need. To pick up a copy of Vectorworks for yourself, you're welcome to call and speak with our specialist, Bob, there. You can reach him by his email address, bob@novedge.com. And if you happen to be a Vectorworks user just north of the American border, Resolve Software Solutions distributes Vectorworks, CINEMA 4D, and numerous other software packages to customers across Canada, as well as providing Vectorworks training and consulting. If you're watching this from Canada, be sure to look for them at resolve.ca. Barbara, I think you have a few things to mention as well.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm here to strongly encourage you to visit the Novedge blog and to get a glimpse at who is changing the world of design one step at a time. This week, for instance, we interview Archistar, or Starchitect, Jürgen Meyer, whose focus is on work at the intersection of architecture, communication, and technology. He is one of the many innovators you can find on the Novedge blog, so come take a look. And also, to catch up with the latest product promos and Novedge webinars, like us on Facebook, another source of endless information and, why not, entertainment. Next week, there are specific tools included in Form Z7 that make it a very smart tool for conceptual architectural modeling. Parametric tools that are specific to architecture include walls, stairs, and more. Other helpful things like working with a combination of solids and surfaces, booleans and NURBS, 2D drawing layout abilities, and several 3D renderings types make it a production powerhouse. Architectural designer and founder of Method Digital Training, Evan Troxell, will lead our next webinar. The presentation is free and will last about 1 hour, including the Q&A session, of course. To sign up, head on over to www.novedge.com/webinar/109. Last but not least, today's webinar is being recorded live, and if you want to rewatch episode 108 in its entirety, as always, you can find it on our Novedge Webinar Series channel through Vimeo and YouTube. Now, if Geoff is ready to go, I think it's showtime.
Great. Thanks, Barbara.
All right, so we're going to switch over to Geoff right now. If you guys have questions, submit them, and enjoy the rest of the presentation. Enjoy.
Okay, thanks, Kevin and Barbara, and let's get rolling. So a little bit about what we're going to do today. Site modeling is a big topic, and one presentation can only cover a few aspects of it. So we're going to make this model, and we're going to create the site, position the building, modify the site to deal with walkways, patio, retaining walls. And in a sense, it's not too hard to find examples on the internet of creating site models like this one. And in fact, there's other good examples within the Novedge series. The slightly different angle that we'll take today is the import of geo-referenced data, meaning that the coordinates, the XY coordinates, correspond to latitude and longitude, and that therefore we can sort of put together surveyor data, base data of property lines and existing buildings and so forth from AutoCAD or DWG files, and air photos. And I'd have to say that in the past, say, 5 to 7 years, this is one of the biggest changes in what comes across my desk as I work with clients, both training and supporting their use of Vectorworks for architecture and for landscape architecture and urban planning as well. A while back we only saw it infrequently. Now I see it in client files at every size and type of firm, and for many of you, you're probably already seeing it in files that come to you. But there is some special care that needs to be taken in Vectorworks so that you don't give yourself a lot of trouble down the road. And so that's where we'll start. Couple more things. As much as time allows, I'll also show some of the typical problems in processing these site modeling files, or I should say the base files that we get from others. I find that for many of our customers, this is often the showstopper. They'd like to use more of it, but they run into some hitch processing the files that they've got to import. And a lot of it isn't that difficult. You just have to kind of be shown what's going on there. And a couple final notes. I'm going to use Vectorworks Designer today, Vectorworks 2014, and the Designer workspace, which has everything Vectorworks makes. My assumption is that some of you will be architect users, some will be landmark users, some may be designer users as well. And this presentation will be appropriate to both. There are a few things to do with site modeling that only exist in landmark or designer, but there are workarounds if you have architect only. I would say that if you do decide to do a lot of 3D site design and you are an architect, like that's a perfect time to consider getting designer and having the whole package. That's really when that's going to make a lot of sense. Okay, so let's get right into it then. I'm going to start here with a blank, empty, untitled file and the import of the DWG. So my assumption in this scenario is that we have acquired property lines, existing buildings, and so on from DWG. The surveyor's GPS points as a text file, and that's going to be the basis of our site model, and a geo-referenced air photo, which is again becoming more and more common. Many municipalities, municipal governments where I am, have them available, probably where you are as well. So let's get right into it then by import single DWG. And this is some sample data that I have found in my travels. And I won't go through a blow-by-blow of DWG import, assuming you know some of this already. But there's really two things that are key here. Of course, the first is units you're working in. And I'm in Vancouver, Canada, and so a bunch of our material today is in metric. We use a combination of metric and imperial, but invariably site information is in metric. So this is in meters. And then the other thing, and the thing that's important for this presentation, is this setting here, center after import. Okay, so let me explain. If this file has all of the information at coordinates which are representative of latitude and longitude, and you do not check this, you may be working something like 5.5 million meters from the file origin. And in Vectorworks, and in fact in any CAD and modeling program, problems can creep in at extreme distances from origin. So this is a method that you'll need to use if you get past geo-referenced files, and this will be particularly important if you need to work back and forth with other consultants and they expect that what you send back is going to come back to them at the same coordinates. So we do this, click OK. And oops, actually, you know what? I have to take you through that one more time. I apologize here. But one little piece of what I was going to mention is new to 2014. There's an option when you do this to reference the file from AutoCAD directly into your drawing. This is a great feature. And what it means is you don't have all of the AutoCAD file and consequently its layer structure in your file directly. However, in my haste in explaining that, I neglected to say it doesn't fit for what we want to do, because this center after import and what it does to our rulers and origin is what we need. So let's just backtrack a little and do this one more time. Center after import without referencing it. Bring everything in. There it is. That's more like it. And note the ruler numbers. So I'm still seeing that gray page box that you Vectorworks users will be so familiar with, which essentially means, of course, that I can just, if I was to print from here, that's where my page would be centered. But essentially what this means is that the internal origin of my file, 00, stays here in its default position. When the information was imported, it's then moved over the center of that internal origin, and the rulers are changed so that they still reflect the numbers that we want to see. And so this gives us the ability to work at that coordinate system, but not be far from the Vectorworks internal origin, meaning everything's going to be sound, accurate, just like we want it. Okay? So now you'd go through your typical process of cleaning up and adjusting visibilities. I'm going to shortcut that right now and just say what we would do here is save this file off and call it something like imported site plan. Okay, so that's step one. Step two then is that you'd go to your own organized file template, which hopefully has a layer structure and a class structure that suits your work. I'm working in one today which is probably a little bit more geared to landscape and site planning than architecture, but as you see, we'll sort of straddle both of those disciplines a bit. And then from here on, what you would do is as follows. We would take a look back at that imported site plan, and let's just take a look at the way we're set up right now. Meters would make the numbers a little less massive. And what we want to do is that in all files in the project, we now want to work with these coordinates somewhere close to our center, our internal origin, our 00 according to that page. So in my template, I'm going to make that adjustment. I'm going to move the adjustable user origin over to somewhere near those numbers. Okay, so I see 494980 and 5461980. You could jot those down, or you could make a point, copy and paste the X and Y values to the other file, however's easiest. But what I'll do right now is I'll just open up that template file and get down onto a design layer. And instead of 0, 0 being the center, we'll now go up, set origin, whereby the next mouse click is the values that I want to use. So I did jot down those numbers. That's my X. That's my Y. And then I'll just choose to put those at the center, and you can see the ruler shift. So now again, I'm in good shape. I'm taking care of that account, that shift I did with the center after import. And I use this shift of origin as a constant in the project. I do it in every file. And then the next step is one you're probably familiar with. I'm going to reference in the imported DWG data. So I'm creating a viewport, and I'm saying I'm going to make the viewport on a design layer, not a sheet layer, and the source of the viewport is going to be an external document. Right there. Okay. Okay. So the reason why we've gone through that step then is that by referencing the file in, I did not inherit the other people's AutoCAD layer structure. Keeps it nice and clean. That's a fairly standard way of operating in Vectorworks these days, and probably something you're already doing. Okay, so we've paired that with this origin shift. Then the next step would be to import image file. So with this survey data, we also have an ortho photo. And notice that there are two files. They have the same name, sample ortho photo, medium res, but different file extensions, .tiff, .tfw. So this TFW file format, this is just a tiny little text file. And if that is in the same location as the photograph, then what will happen is, you'll see here, it asks us how we want to bring it in. I'll click OK, and I get this message. The imported image has been scaled and translated according to an associated world file. If you do not want this to occur, please rename the world file. So it should automatically go to the perfect place in my file because that little TFW file tells it where to go. All right? Now, I happen to know that it's going to work incorrectly this time around. So here's one of the possible little hitches that you need to know about, but it's an easy thing to fix. And so it's gone to a different place, and the numbers are a whole lot different. Okay? So the reason why is because of that origin shift that I did. And the import of the image file is placing it at the coordinates it's told to place it, but it doesn't know about my shifted user origin. All right? So I've done one shift of origin, and then it's moved it another distance. And in fact, probably if I took these values here, it's X, Y values, and I just divided them in two. Tab, tab. And then I come back and fit to objects. I'd see I'm pretty close. It's not exactly perfect yet, though. All right, so I'm going to just show you the trick to make this work with this adjusted origin. And to do that, I'm going to go back here and just show you what's in this file. So if I take this TFW file and I just open it in any text program, you can see what's here. There's only 6 lines of text, and these last lines look suspiciously like those X and Y values that I shifted just a moment ago. So all that's happening with these ortho photos is that this text file says, hey, put the top left corner of the photo at this X coordinate and this Y coordinate. All right? So to fix up my photo, I'm going to just copy that number, and I'm going to come back, and let's just do that one more time here. Taking time to put it on the aerial photo layer. Okay. First we'll let it go to the wrong place, then we'll fix it up. Paste, tab, switch back. There's my Y value, copy, switch, paste, tab. And there we have it, lining up perfectly underneath. Okay, so now we've got 2 things aligned and in exactly the right spot. Then the third thing we need is we want to be able to create a site model. Now, I could honestly do a couple of hours just on the processes around getting information into Vectorworks to make your site model. But I would say, just like I've seen a much greater amount of geo-referenced information in the past few years, and that's becoming a bigger and bigger thing. In terms of getting the elevations into your site model, the best way to do it is this import survey file command, whereby you will just get a text file from the surveyor instead of having all of the contours by DWG. There are many ways to start your site model in Vectorworks. This one is by far the least trouble, because if you have to clean up survey or contours which someone else has drawn, not only do you are you dealing with their interpolation of the data that was shot by the surveyor, but you've usually got a lot more cleanup to do in Vectorworks. So if I can encourage you one way, it's that as much as possible, see if you can simply get a text file which has the critical survey data. You can get the DWG too if that has other things, but this is the nicest way to go. So this is also just a text file, and if I choose it here, I get an import box where I can choose some things to do with its format. So this is another thing that needs just a little bit of demystification. So what I'm going to do is come back, and I'm going to take that text file. .csv means comma separated values. So therefore, every field of information that would go in my spreadsheet, if I bring it into Excel, is separated by a comma. That's how it knows to go to the next box. And a carriage return takes me to the next line. So by looking at this survey data here in Excel, I can see what I'm dealing with and make sure I don't make any mistakes bringing it in. And I see 5 columns of information. It looks like I've got, for the most part, consecutive numbering here. So that's probably a survey point, that a sort of a an integer that the surveyor used as they shot each point. These numbers should be starting to look a little bit familiar because they're very like those origin numbers we punched in. So this is my y-axis, this is my x-axis. And then these ones are showing elevations, in this case 45 meters above sea level. Normally there will be a field which also has some plain English description of what's at that point. Top of wall, bottom of wall, IP, whatever it is that is relevant for. In this case, I see repeated numbers, so I assume that there's some kind of legend that would go with this, and they have a kind of standard code that a 15 is such and such. So if I saw this in a job I was doing, I'd go and track that down from the surveyor. Okay. Now that I know how that data is ordered, when I'm back at Vectorworks, I know what to do. I can see, oh, okay, I get 4 different choices of how the data can come in. And I need this one. ID, that was that code number at the beginning. Northings and eastings, that matches with the numbers that we saw. Description is the final one. Each field is separated by a comma, just like we saw. And we're going to create Vectorworks stake objects for each survey point. Click OK. And because no stake objects have yet been created in this file, it comes up with a preferences box and says, what do you want these things to look like? So I'll say, yes, include them as site model data. I find making a cross is often the most clear, and I'll label them with their elevations. Click OK. And there it is. Let's just clean that up a little bit. There's all my survey data. And if you got that order wrong, the northings, eastings versus eastings, northings, you'll find that your data and the shape of your site is all rotated 90 degrees. And that's usually your clue to just get out of that, go back, do it again, and reverse the choice in the dialog box. Okay, so there are many small variations on how that might come to you. The DWG, the orthophoto, and these survey points. But if you just keep in mind this sort of process of taking it apart and looking at the plain text files, there's nothing really very complicated there, and it's possible to sort out most problems. If you're past a DWG survey with all the contours drawn, it might be worth a phone call to the surveyor, simply saying, could you just send me the text file that has all the survey points, and that will make your life a lot easier in getting this data in there. All right. So what you're seeing here, air photo, base plan, imported site data, it's my preference to keep these things all on separate layers. And it's also my preference to keep the source data just as you've got it on its own layer, because although this one's pretty clean, there are many times when I find I need to go back and forth in this next step of making the site model 2 or 3 times just to make sure I've got everything right. Okay, so now we're ready to make the site model. I've got all of my stake objects. Before I do anything else, I am just going to click on Fit to Objects. And sure enough, there's a stray. There's something way off to the side. With both DWG and with these survey points, this is something to look out for. Look out for the stray objects out in space. In this case, I don't think it's an accident. I think that there is a point that these guys use that's in one constant location in the city, and that is some sort of reference point, but we don't need it here, and I'm going to get rid of it, because otherwise what's going to happen is it's going to create a site model with one point off several miles away. And so with that done, I'll make the site model. And to do that, I'm going to just set my layer options so that I only get stake objects. This is not necessary, this next step, but what I'm going to do is copy all of them, move up a layer, paste in place, and make my site model out of the copies, thereby leaving the originals intact in case I need to go back to them. And from here we go into AEC, Terrain, Create Site Model. Okay, there's a lot of options in the site model settings box. Many of them are kind of self-evident, so I won't take time to explain all of them. But what we will do is set the major ones here. So we can set contour intervals, minor and major. The only thing that's not that intuitive here is, well, if you can set this minor contour interval to any distance or mount you want. So this is in meters, so I'm going to go, I want it pretty fine-grained, and I'm going to look at 20 centimeter intervals, where every fifth contour is a major or heavier line contour. And that's the thing that's not that obvious. This one is measured in distance, the units you're working in your file, and this is just a number, like 5 or 10, meaning every fifth or 10th contour gets the major contour treatment. I can set how it's going to look in 2D, how it's going to look in 3D. So I will just make a couple of quick choices here. And existing mesh solid. Click OK. Let's clean up a little bit, turn off the imported data underneath, and turn off the base plan. And you can see what we've got. Okay, so that was pretty smooth and pain-free, and without me sort of talking through the process, you're really only about 10 minutes in at this point. Now, even though that was pretty straightforward, there is some cleanup that usually needs to be done. Some of it we can see here just looks kind of suspicious. Like, what's this little hill here, and what's this little hill here? If we dig in a little deeper, we will probably find that there were some elevations that were things like top of sign or top of post, and it's extraneous data as part of my site model. It's not actually a hill. The other thing we can see a little bit better, if I move into 3D, I'll go to my flyover tool, click, tip it up, and just do a quick OpenGL render. And that is, here at the edges, you're getting this triangulation that doesn't look right. What's happened is, this is really a big 3D connect the dots tool. We gave it these dots. It puts it together into this triangulated network. And when it gets to the edge, it doesn't know what to do. So it says, oh, I'll just connect to the closest one I can find, and that happens to be down here. So for that reason, you might need to do a little bit of cropping as well as you get your site model. And one thing that's extremely helpful is if you have some survey points off of the site that you're going to work on, so that when you crop back, you're dealing with all good data and you're not dealing with one of these sort of edge conditions. So quickly, how that can be done is as follows. If I just right-click on the site model, I get some hidden choices here. Edit source data, edit site model crop. Perfect, the two things I need to do. So I'm going to go in, and I'm in an editing window that's just like editing a symbol or a group with this orange band around the window. And here's one of the suspicious bits of data. So I'm inside the container of the site model. There's the original points that it kind of swallowed up into the container to make it. And I'm going to go delete that object, exit, and you'll see that this gets immediately regraded. And that sort of hill is gone. Okay. Then to do the site model crop, I'm going to do a couple more things here. I'm going to bring back that, and let's set ourselves up to work on the orthogonal. It'll be much easier. So I might go like so. So I'm squared to the site that I'm going to work on. And there's a couple of ways, actually, that I can now crop this site model back so I don't get those funny edges, and so that I can see more clearly just the part that I'm going to work on, which is this center lot here. One is that the reshape tool has special modes when used in conjunction with the site model. And this one lets you crop. So the boundary now is just something that you can push and pull like a site model. All right, and the boundary that's there at the moment is just a perimeter of all the points it's got. By the way, the other cool thing you can do in here is in this mode, you can take any of these labels, grab the handle, and move the label to somewhere else, so you can use it when you're making a site plan to get those contour labels where you want them. But this would be a fussy job to fix up this many point polygon for the crop. So I'm going to go into this other way here, edit model crop. Oh, hang on a second. Let's come back to here where we're rotated. Let's do it this way. Draw a nice clean rectangle. I'm going into the lane at the back here a little bit, and the street part way. Cut. Edit model crop. Yeah, well, that's not behaving for me. Sorry, we'll just get this cleaned up. There. We make a new crop and we delete the old polygon. There we go. Now we have a cropped site model, and we're only seeing the portion we need to see. Okay, so with all of that done, I'm now going to skip to a new file here, and I'm going to go to some pre-made files here, and we'll just sort of look at the steps along. So in this next file, I've done a couple of things. One is I've added a saved view, which will automatically rotate me to this angle so that I'm square to the page. So one of the consequences of working in this geo-referenced way is you probably have to work using the rotated plan feature, and it's nice to set that up. The other thing I'd like to do now is that as I start to work on the site, you can see what's happening here. I've added a very simple massing model. Okay? And what we're dealing with on this residential lot is something that you see quite a bit here in Vancouver where I live, where in Many places you're now allowed to build a second smaller dwelling at the back of a lot in order to make more density throughout the city. So we're going to use that scenario as our example here. And in working with the site model, one of the things I'd like to do is to know where the property line is as I'm working. So there's an easy way to do that, but what happens is because that base plan is in another file, I can't just copy and paste directly. I need to go back and trace that. So here's my reference viewport. If I right-click on it, I can say edit the reference design layer. In other words, take me to the other file. And it takes me into that file, and in that file I can just take the line or the polygon which represents that lot. Actually, it's that lot. And I can paste it back to my other file, and everything will correspond. It'll be in perfect registration because of that care we took with the origins beforehand. So I might do something like this: duplicate, and make the duplicate into the none, put it in the none class, so I don't bring the other person's layer structure with me. Okay. Then cut, switch back. And here on the site model layer, I can paste in place, and I'll now have a new object right there. Okay. So what I'm going to do as well is to just bring us along a little bit. I'm looking at our time here and want to make sure we get to all of these parts. So if I cut to an example where we've already done this, let's just take a look at it. And you can see now that we have a site boundary which is here and showing up in 3D. And this is very easy to do. All that's required is you take that polygon or rectangle that we just pasted a moment ago, and you grab an object. I'll put, say, a rectangle here. Many kinds of objects, such as, for example, a polygon, symbols, plants in Vectorworks Landmark, all of them will respond to the command I'm heading to, which is simply called send to surface. And so when that's done, that 2D polygon was converted to 3D polys, which then will sort of fold, drape over the surface of the site model. At the same time, what we're going to do to set us up for the next part here is I'm going to create a site modifier object. So to go from our existing site to the new proposed site, we can use a variety of site modifiers. And site modifiers can consist of objects made with this tool, the little bulldozer here, stake objects, which can be like a point elevation, which can modify the site up or down to that point, or these grade tools. Okay, so we'll take a look at how that begins now by looking at our sort of house design, our laneway house, and how it's going to go into the file. All right. Now, here's the model we're going to use. All right, so it's just a small structure made with pretty conventional Vectorworks setup and tools, walls, doors, windows, and various extrudes. And here you'll face a choice about how you set up your files. Your options are that if you were a single person design office, it would probably make sense to do this house design right in the same file where your site model is, because then you can work back and forth with everything on top, fitting them together. You might create the house in a separate file if you have a couple or more people working on the project and you need to split up the work. And in other scenarios, large projects, it may be an absolute necessity that your plans and model is essentially in one file, whereas where your site is in another file. Okay. So in this case, what I'm going to do is, since I don't want to get focused on the architectural part in this presentation, we've got it created here in this file, and I'm just going to bring it in to my site model file, and let's see how they come together. Okay, so in spite of drawing the model in the other file, I need to look at the elevations and the places that the overall finished grade of this house as it sits here. So I've given myself a little starting point, and let's draw some walls. I'm just going to pick one of the stock Vectorworks wall styles, 8-inch concrete, and I happen to know my perimeter size from that design is 13'6" by 24 feet. Okay. Right now, these walls are at 0, and my closest contour is 41 meters up. I'm going to change the height. And here, of course, the stuff that I'm excluding is your design process, whereby you're going to want to look at this and figure out what are your grades going to be, what's your elevation going to be for the building. That's not so much a technical Vectorworks issue as a design issue. So I'm going to work with some given numbers here. Okay, so while if I was doing an architectural project, the heights of the walls might be in relation to a story or numbers set into the layers. Here I'm just doing it from 0. The bottom offset, I have a number 4. And the top offset, I have a number 4. Okay. And then if I just pop this up, you can see what we're dealing with. So I'm in the vicinity, but now what we need to do is cut the terrain out around this. And so the best way to do this, come back to plan here, is with this tool. Retaining Wall Site Modifier. So this tool is a landmark and designer tool. And even if you're not creating buildings, you're going to use it a lot. If you are creating buildings, you need designer to see it. If you have only architect, though, there's simple ways to do it, and we're going to do that next. And what this does is it creates a site modifier object inside my walls. So it will shape the terrain so that that site model will change its shape according to what I want to see. It has these three parts. It will make a pad, a sort of a flat surface. And let's see here. We want to make offset above wall bottom 0. We'll just put the pad at the wall bottom. And then we have to pay attention to the edges. So what's it going to do on the left edge and what's it going to do on the right edge? And my walls, if you can see, all have little arrows here which indicates their direction. They were drawn in this clockwise fashion. And if I don't like the direction they're going, I can reverse them. But this is significant because now I know what the left side is. It's this outside edge. And my left side, I'm going to say just follow the existing terrain that's there. And on the right side, I'm going to say offset above wall bottom equals 0. Okay, so it's going to go to the bottom of the wall. It's going to scoop out the fill there. The third tab is for whether it has edges across the ends. Not necessary here because I don't actually see the end of a wall in any of these. It asks me if I want to extend the site model. That's fine. And now what's done, you can see a red line there, and it's created a site modifier all around. I'll just pop it into 3D. And from the red line, you can tell what it's doing. On the outside, it's going to go to the existing terrain. On the inside, it's going to, as I say, scoop it out. And if we just get us a little bit better. Oh, the other thing we should do, of course this would help, is in 3D, show me the proposed only, update the site model. There we are. Okay. So there's the first of our site modifiers. Now, I'm going to take a little shortcut here. Because of the way that I drew the model elsewhere, I don't actually need to keep those walls here, and I've just brought in the finished building as a viewport reference. Okay. So that goes back to the choice we talked about as to whether or not you would work with it in the same file or a different file. We've got some more grading to do because I can see it's up a little bit high here. Okay. So what we need to do now, come back to plan, is I'm going to go to my next file. And in this file, again, just to save a couple of steps, I've thought about the next parts of the site design that I might do, and I've just done them with 2D rectangles. Here we'll have sort of a patio held in by a retaining wall, a walkway, and several other pieces of walkway, which I've drawn as separate segments, anticipating that we might want to have a flat segment ramp down flat across here, ramping down again, fitting the general site. I'm showing this to you as all sort of drawn already. Of course, your process will be a little bit more back and forth. And so in order to use these to modify the site and also to create a hardscape, we are going to now take these shapes that I've created, and I'm just going to take a copy of them, Command C, go down to the hardscapes layer, paste them there. I'm going to use those in just a minute. Okay, back to my site model layer. These remaining rectangles, I'd like to have them as modifiers now, which are going to shape the ground. I've also got one here which is under the deck of that small house because I noticed that the land was a little bit high right now. A cardinal rule for how you use site modifiers in Vectorworks is that none of them can touch each other. So again, building up to just converting all of these to site modifiers, I'm simply going to do a small offset to make them all a little smaller, and then I won't have this problem. So I'll just click. I've offset it, offset the original, keeping it a little bit smaller, and I'm just moving around here. I'll select that one and offset, select offset, select offset, select offset, and then the final one. And it doesn't matter one bit that there's a tiny bit of space between them. Okay. So now let's take all of these pieces and in one go we'll convert them all to these site modifier objects. So these can be drawn with this tool wherein you draw them like you draw a polygon, but I like to do it this way where I just use regular drawing tools and then come up here, create objects from shapes, where I can create all manner of parametric objects from basic geometry. Site modifier, should it delete the source objects? Yes. Show me the properties? Okay. And then the type of site modifier I'm going to use in this case is simply called a pad, a flat segment or a planar segment. It doesn't have to be flat, it can be sloped as well. And I'll click OK, and there are now 6 site modifiers. Once again, your design process will be a little bit more involved than mine, but I'm going to now go through and just set elevations to them. So let's start here with this pad that's under the deck. What I'm going to do is set that one at an elevation of 41.8, and I'm also going to say slope 2, and when that happens I get a new choice in here, angle or percent, and then this tag appears, and what I do is I pull this and set the arrow in the direction of the slope, and that can be a rise or a fall if I put it negative. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of a positive slope, a fall away from the building. These guys too will be at the same elevation of 41.8. Okay. And again, I worked out a little bit of this in advance. So here up against the house, we'll put this at 42.5. This one will need to slope. So we'll start at that same 42.5 that was here by the flat one, but then say it's going to come down certain percent, and then fix that up. Then this is our final one. It'll start at that same 41.8, and it'll need a 6% slope. Which I have to direct that way. Whenever you use site modifiers, you also need to tell the site model how far it can regrade objects. So I've made another type of site modifier. Again, you can use that tool or the same command I used just a moment ago. And this one is configured not as a pad, but as grade limits. And you can see exactly what it does here. The blue line represents the regrading that took place around the foundation. And so that 41-meter contour fades back into the existing green contour right at the grade limits. It can't regrade past that point. The other thing is that I can't have any site modifiers go past that grade limits, or Vectorworks will squawk at me. So what I'll do is I'll just use my reshape and I'll pull that back a touch inside. I went a little bit offline there, a little bit out of line. I'm usually very, very accurate with these things, but with these site modifiers, it doesn't matter. It needs to be about the shape of what we need underneath the walkway we're going to create. And then with all of those created, let's just see if we've got all of them done correctly, and the quickest way to do that is just go to the site model here and click Update. Looks pretty good. I saw the contours get regraded around that. I'll pop it into 3D. And again, looks like everything lines up pretty decently. Okay, so that took care of the grades. Oh, this one I didn't get my fall behaving. I think I'll skip that for now, just in the interest of time, because we're a little bit over time. And what I will do is then just show you, as we're kind of coming to the very last steps here, that the objects which I'd taken back to this hardscapes layer, here what I can do is simply add all of these together into a single shape. Might be clearer if I did that. And use the hardscape tool. All right. Like the site modifier, I can use the tool and draw like a polygon, but my preference is to draw the shape some other way and go back and say, turn all of that into a hardscape. From that, you can go in and tell it what it's going to look like, both in 2D and in 3D. Okay? And the thing that we're interested in here is for it to become what's called a texture bed, meaning that it will take the textures that we choose, bricks. I'll give it a border of something like that, and say that the border is going to be cast in place concrete. And what that will mean is that the texture of pavers and concrete will drape across my landscape, and I don't need to get into drawing fussy separate pieces, some which slope, some which are flat. I handled all of that with the site modifiers, and this will take care of the rest. Okay, I'm running a little bit over time, so what I'm going to do is just show how it all comes together. Let me close something up here and go back to my finished file. Okay, so what we were just looking at then, there's a hardscape object already configured, like we saw just a moment ago. So I've said in 3D, turn this into a texture bed, meaning show me this 3D texture over top of the site model, draped. Separate one for center and the main texture and the border. Okay. And one thing about those texture beds, in order to see them, you have to update your site model before you do. I'll just do a quick render. And now with an OpenGL render, you can see how that texture shows up draped across the site model. I've done a couple more things just to kind of flesh it out. I've put in some landmark plants. I made the planting areas also as a hardscape object, where using as a texture bed, it'll sort of drape this kind of mulch texture across. And the site model itself can take on a texture, which will just become its surface here. So, last thing, a RenderWorks camera takes me to a view. We'll just do a quick RenderWorks rendering. And this pulls together some of the pieces. So with that said, I will wrap it up because I'm a little bit over time, but there you have, coming from scratch, a site model whereby we put together 3 separate pieces, all in registration of geo-referenced coordinate system, and then modified the site to kind of push and pull to a proposed site model from the existing by use of these various site modifiers. Okay, Kevin, I'll turn it over to you and see if we still got time for a few questions.
Yeah, so let's take maybe about 5 to 10 minutes to answer a number of questions. I'll start from the top. Geoff, I assigned some to you already. Maybe we could skim through it. Let's see. See if there's any interesting questions. Go ahead and answer them. Read them out loud. Let's see. You are the Vectorworks expert here.
Okay, will Geoff be sectioning the model he makes? If so, I have 2 questions related to site section. I had a site section in at the very beginning, but I dropped it out because of time constraints. Why don't we, that is probably going to be of interest to everyone, so I can probably in 60 seconds or so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Site section, and maybe Neil can add his questions back in.
Sounds good.
And maybe you could read those off to me, Kevin, as you see them, since I don't have the whole list here.
Oh, okay. So let's see.
Okay.
All right.
And while we're getting that, what I'm going to do is say, I've just gone back to my model. We don't need that on. And what I'm going to do is go create section viewport, and I'm going to take something straight through that site. I'm going to point this direction. I can choose to put this on either a sheet layer for presentation in a sheet or a design layer, and I've got one here, site sections, thinking that I might be wanting to look at that during the design process. Okay, that looks rather messy right now, but what we'll do is just go active only and then pop it up, and then you can see what we're getting actually, which is a partial view of it, but what I would do next is set my view to that, and then we'll really be able to see what's going on. So I just set my working plane, and I'll go look at working plane. Okay, and the other thing that I find is more effective for many of these is to take away all the 3D stuff beyond. If I'm just using it for an analysis of heights and this kind of thing, it's just nice and clear like this. Okay, so let's see.
All right, so back to Neo, correct?
Follow-up here. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just assigning them to you now, and I'll read it out loud. So is there a way to display existing and proposed contours / grade in a live site section? Neo is aware of making a non-live one by AEC Terrain.
There's not really a great way to do that, Neil, because what you're actually seeing here is, of course, that the section viewport displays kind of a 2D profile over this whole thing. And so while we can have the site model show up in such a fashion that it draws every contour, no, you know what? The answer is probably that if you want to have it just for sort of design purposes, I would go back and do it so that so that what I look at is instead this kind of view. Site model as extruded contours, because then at least you could count contours as you go and sort of know where you are. But there's not an automatic thing that's going to do perfectly what you're looking for, I guess. Yes, sorry, was there another question along that, or do we move to?
Yes, yeah, so Neil's other question is regarding a site model snapshot. When is it useful to use one? And does the site model snapshot actually update when you edit the original editable site? Because it appears that it does. Or is this simply a display hiccup?
Site model snapshot, and does it update when you display? Site model snapshot should always update. And when I would use it, you know, I think I may have locked myself up here. It's taking its time here. I'm just going to get out of there and come back in. The site model snapshot is a means of having a second display type, so that you could have a site model which shows, for example, proposed contours, while beside it you have another site model showing me a kind of site analysis. To give you a quick example of that, if it does not update, I would say you're just looking at a temporary glitch. Normal behavior is that it will update just fine, and I'll show people what's going on here. I've got a site model, and I say I want to display it showing me colored slopes, which gives me a kind of color coding according to percentage slope with parameters I can set. Okay, I say create a snapshot, and what it does is actually create another site model object, which I could then, if I wished, sort of move beside it and go back and adjust my original site model and work at on the two in tandem. Okay, and so they can have you can have a sort of an analysis, make adjustments, see what it's doing to your site grades, that kind of thing. Okay, hopefully that answers that. Let's look at a couple of the others here.
Okay. So I think we're a little bit pressed for time. Geoff, how about we answer one more question, and then maybe we can figure something out in terms of like answering these questions and maybe sharing it as a blog post on Resolve and also at Novedge.
Okay, let's do that. I'll follow up, and we have all your questions here.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe then as a last question, I always thought the origin had to be 0. 0, 0, not true, Luke. Yeah, maybe that's a good point to end on, because that was such a big part of the session today. So what's happening in the procedure we went through is that the Vectorworks, any Vectorworks file, has both an internal origin that it uses for all of its sort of calculation of where things are, and a user origin, the one that you can change if you click between the rulers here or go to that set origin command. And in fact, in dealing with anything geo-referenced or just a long ways from origin, the biggest takeaway from today is, no, you do want to go through this process of centering all of your information over top of that internal origin, but then adjusting it so that the rulers are correct, meaning when you export later on back to DWG, the people at the other end will receive it in exactly the same XY position that they sent you the original file. So that's very important, and there's actually a supporting paper about this at Vectorworks, which I can include information about when we answer the rest of these questions on the blog. Okay, back to you, Kevin.
All right. Okay, I'll switch back to me. I got to say, Geoff, I've been pleasantly surprised by the number of questions that we've been getting from our attendees here. So let me get back to this. All right. So let me know if you guys can see my screen. You should be able to now. All right. There we go. But yeah, first of all, thank you guys for attending. You guys are really surprising us with all the amount of questions. I will work with Geoff. We'll try to figure out a way, provide links to Resolve and also to our blog, see if we can get those answers to your questions and maybe some other extras as well that'll help you learn more. But I do want to say that today's presentation is brought to you by Novedge. If you're looking to pick up the latest version of Vectorworks, we have a whole entire catalog from Nemetschek listed on our website. Feel free to contact us at contact our representative Bob there. You can contact him with his email address, bob@novedge.com. But if you guys are located in Canada, I strongly encourage you guys to check out Resolve Software Solutions. That's at resolve.ca. They have a whole bunch of training material. They do training as well, but they're also a distributor of Vectorworks, CINEMA 4D, and a whole array of plugins and software as well. So do check it out. You guys just had a presentation by Jeffries, who is the president at Resolve Solutions. So I think he's a really nice guy. I know he's a really nice guy. So yeah, definitely check out the website and see what you guys can get from that. Barbara?
Yeah, thank you so much, Geoff. That was really cool webinar, really great presentation. I'm here to remind everybody again to visit the Novedge blog and to meet the innovators, the makers, the architects, the VFX artists who work right on the edge of creativity and technology. Great interviews, great images, and great stories. Come visit us today at blog.novedge.com. And to catch up with the latest product promos and Novedge webinars, like us on Facebook. Next week, our next webinar will be presented by architectural designer and founder of Method Digital Training, Evan Troxel. And it's going to be all about Form Z7. a very smart tool for conceptual architecture modeling. Parametric tools that are specific to architecture include walls, stairs, and more. So also next week the presentation will be free and will last about an hour, including the Q&A session. To sign up, head over on to www.novedge.com/webinar/109. Thank you so much. And to rewatch today's webinar, you can always find it on our webinars series channel through Vimeo and YouTube. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time. And Geoff, have a great rest of the night.
Thanks very much.
All right. Okay, everybody, have a good one. We'll keep you guys posted. Ciao.